Hi everyone, this is Sir Luis again, and in this video we're going to discuss operations on fractions. Fractions are foundational to algebra, trigonometry, or even in calculus. So if kids don't understand fractions in elementary or in high school, they will have a tough road ahead of them in senior high school or even in college, right? So this is how I teach addition and subtraction of fractions. I start with a word lesson like one apple plus one apple. There's always a way to make fractions simple and easy for kids. You just have to remember that math is a language and we have to use it as an advantage. So we have here one apple plus one apple. Since we are adding to the same thing, since you have 1 plus 1, this will be equal to 2 and 2 apple. All right. And since it is 2, you have to write it in a plural form, which is with S, which is 2 apples. All right. So let's have another one. If we're going to have two pencils, three pencils. And we're going to add this 2, all right? And we have 2 the same thing that we're going to add. Since you have 2 and 3, this will be equal to 5, and you have 5 pencils. How about if we're going to have 1/3 plus 1/3? If you're having a hard time in dealing with these fractions, you can basically rewrite this in the form of these words. So you will have 1/3 plus 1/3. All right. Or I mean the plus operation. So this will be equal to, you have two the same things that you're going to add. So this will be equal to 2/3. All right. You just have to put S because it's in plural form. By using this concept, you can simply answer those fractions that have the same denominator, or meaning to say they have the same things that you're going to add or subtract. So we're going to use this concept as an analogy to make fractions easy to understand. What if you're asked to get one orange plus one apple? What will happen to this? Can we say that we have two orange or we have two apples? In this case, you have to get the common denominators of orange and apple. If you don't get the common denominator, this will just be equal to one orange plus one apple. All right. But if you try to get their common denominator, since orange and apple are both fruits, then you can basically have an answer. Oh, you have two fruits. That is orange and apple. All right. So in this way, in adding and subtracting fractions, whether the fraction is dissimilar or not, they have the same thing or not, you will have the confidence to solve problems involving operations of fractions by using this simple analogy. All right. So let's move on in addition and subtraction of similar fractions. I assume that you all know what are similar fractions, and those are the fractions that have common denominators. And by using the apple plus apple concept as an analogy to understand this, it would be very simple. Let's have examples here. Let's have number 1. We're going to add 1/4 plus 2/4. All right. Since we have two the same things that we're going to add here, basically this will just be equal to the sum of their numerators. All right. All over 4. So this will be equal to 3/4. Before we box this, make sure that this will be your final answer. So is 3 and 4 are still simplifiable? If it's not, since 3 and 4 are relatively prime, this will be your final answer. All right. So let's have another example where you have 7 over 8 minus 3 over 8. The same process, since you have two the same things, you're just going to get the difference of the numerators. This will be equal to 7 minus 3 all over 8. And this will result to 4 over 8. Make sure that your 4 and 8 are relatively prime. Before we box this, make sure that this is your final answer. And since we all know that 4 and 8 have a common factor, which is 4, so basically this is still simplifiable. And this will be equal to 1 over 2. All right. So let's have the last example, number 3, right? So let's say we have 12 over 15 minus 9 over 15. So as you can see, you have two the same things here. So basically, you're just going to subtract the numerators, which are 12 and 9, all over 15. So this will result to 3 over 15. And let's see if 3 and 15 have a common factor. And yes, it is still simplifiable. And as we simplify this, this will be equal to 1 over 5. So this will be our final answer. So in cases like 2 and 3, if you use the indicated operation in getting the sum or the difference of fractions, and the fractions are still simplifiable, then you have to write it in its simplest form. You have to remember that fractions are meant to be simplified. All right? So adding and subtracting similar fractions are very simple. So let's move on in adding and subtracting similar, dissimilar fractions. All right, dissimilar fractions. So I assume that you all know what are dissimilar fractions, and those are the fractions that have different denominators. All right. So in here, you can still use the analogy, but you have to get their common denominators. Let's say, for example, we have 1. We're going to add 2 over 9 plus 4 over 3. And since you have two different things here that you're going to add, you have to get their common denominator. And for you to get their common denominator, you have to use the concept of LCD. And the LCD of this fraction is 9. All right. So the LCD of this fraction is 9. So in order to add dissimilar fractions, you have to write these two in terms of a common denominator. All right. So this will be equal to 9 over 9. That's 1 times 2. You have 2 plus 9 over 3. You have 3 times 4. This will be equal to 12. All right. So you have 2 over 12. This will be equal to 14 over 9. So 14 over 9 are relatively prime. Then this will be our final answer. All right. So in your final answer, you have to simplify if it is possible. But if it's not, then you just have to box it as your final answer. So let's have another example. We have here 3 over 14 minus 7 over 10. Since we have two different things here, we have to get their common denominators. Express these two fractions in terms of a common denominator so that you can add or subtract this fraction. So the LCD of these fractions is 70. All right? And we're going to rewrite these fractions in terms of their common denominator. So you have 70 over 14. This will be equal to 5 times 3. You have 15 minus 70 over 10. That's 7 times 7. You have 49. So by subtracting these two, you will have here negative 34 all over 70. And since 34 and 70 are both even number, you can still simplify this. So this will be equal to, if you divide this by 2 from the numerator and the denominator, this will be equal to negative 17 all over 35. And we all know that 17 is a prime number and 35 doesn't have any factor of 17. So this will be our final answer. All right. So in solving the similar fractions, you have first to rewrite the fractions in terms of their common denominators before you proceed in the process of addition or subtraction. So if you have questions, just write it down in the comment section and see you next video.